All right, so my name is Joe Majdalani. I'm a professor of aerospace engineering, and what I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit about the research that we carry out here at Auburn as part of the Advanced Propulsion Research Laboratory. First off, this is a cross-section of our team and some of the activities that we've been engaged in. The purpose of our lab is to seek to improve the performance and safety of different combustors, specifically rocket engines. We try to improve performance by leveraging the use of swirl or the introduction of swirl into the systems. And we try to improve safety by making sure that the engines are stable. So we've been doing this for quite some time. And one of the highlights of our research is that it has been recently recognized on the cover of Viscous Fluid Flow. This is a well-known textbook that covers boundary layer theory. And the fourth edition, which just showed up in 2021, actually features the swirl-driven bidirectional vortex engine that our team has been working on since 1995 on both its front cover and back cover. So this is one of the highlights that I wanted to mention. So this is our team photo, although it is missing several important members. We are hoping to update that very soon. This is also a cross-section of our sponsors. Our main sponsors over time have been the National Science Foundation, Orbitech, and now Sierra Nevada Corporation, or SNC, and also NASA. We also had a variety of other sponsors, but research in flight is that's led by Dr. Hartfield and Dr. Ahuja are also our partners. We're doing some exciting stuff on aeroacoustics. So the focus areas consist of two particular interests. One of them has to do with swirl-driven cyclonic engines. This is an area that we have devoted a tremendous amount of time and energy to. And the second area of interest has to do with the modeling of wave propagation and vortiacoustic waves in a variety of enclosures, combustion chambers, and rocket systems. Both areas have been identified in the recent past as areas of critical national importance. And when we look at some of the combustors out there, there's quite a variety. We have been fortunate to have worked on some of those, mostly led and sponsored by Orbitech, by Dr. Chiaverini at Orbitech, which is now SNC. And the latest development is that of the Vortex engine, which was previously called the Vision engine, or the VCCWC, which is being considered for adoption on the Dream Chaser vehicle. So a little bit about the Vortex engine. This is a cyclonic engine that is very unconventional. Unlike most engines, injection takes place just upstream of the nozzle at the base of the chamber, whereas all other rocket engines, liquid rocket engines, include both fuel and oxidizer injection at the top. In this case, we introduce the oxidizer at the bottom and the fuel at the top. This leads to the formation of very nicely helical bipolar motion that leads to a very good, very efficient convective cooling of the walls internally through that stream of injectant that is being introduced into the chamber that travels around, traversing the length of the chamber twice before exiting. So it leads to numerous advantages we're going to talk about a little bit. And we've been engaged in this program since its inception, even at the proposal submission stage. Our team has been fortunate to have been part of most of the computational and theoretical studies leading to the advancement of this technology. Here are some images of the cold flow simulations that we carried out at an early stage, trying to describe that nicely bidirectional cyclonic motion in a right cylindrical rocket engine. We also have carried out numerous studies. I'm giving you here a flavor of the work we've done in order to demonstrate that the chamber is self-cooled, nicely self-cooled. We've carried out reactive simulations that included methane, propane, hydrogen, and oxygen combustion, which tend to lead to very large adiabatic flame temperatures at the core here in the neighborhood of 3,500 K. And yet notice, despite the very large temperatures in the core region, the walls were very nicely cooled at very low temperatures, thus leading to a very nice design that enables us to eliminate cooling jackets all around the engine. So ultimately it leads to a much lighter weight engine, also a very efficient engine. Now, of course, for upper stage applications, these are very beneficial. Here's a top view and an isometric view of the simulation results that we've had, some of the earliest that helped promote this technology, and we were able to demonstrate how well cooled the engine can be. And again, when the walls are cooled internally, that enables us to get away with using lighter and thinner walls. And also it will give us a greater flexibility in the selection of materials that could be used for this application. Here are some other examples with different polar slices and some vertical slices along the chamber length. And also we can study the distribution of the species all throughout the engine very nicely. We can, for example, determine how steam is generated, the H2O products, how they are generated, how they lead to the cooling of the walls, how the oxygen that is at low temperature is distributed, and how also it leads to a thin film cooling of the, in this case, of the nozzle, etc. And again, we've gone through multiple iterations trying to determine the best arrangement of injectors and injector placements and orientations. We looked at co-swirling of the fuel, counter-swirling of the fuel injectors, axial injectors, and radial injectors in order to determine the best combination that will lead to the most efficient engine that will not have any hot spots along the walls. And that has ultimately led to a very nice configuration. The engine has been well celebrated in the community. There have been experiments where the chamber walls were made out of plexiglass, and in this case, the combustion was between hydrogen and oxygen. And again, despite the very large temperatures in the core region, the plexiglass walls did not melt. And that's, of course, due to the effective film cooling of the walls by virtue of the low temperature oxidizer that's being injected and introduced into the chamber straight from liquid form. As you know, oxygen boils off at about 90 degrees Kelvin, so it leads to a very efficient cooling effect. Also, the engine has been well recognized in various magazines. Here we're looking at Aerospace America. It's been featured quite a few times, including the December issue, amongst the most promising new US technologies. And also, this is a Space Times magazine featuring the engine and calling it the Tame Tornado. Again, to give an idea of how important that program has been, this is one particular contract from the Air Force in the amount of $25 million that's been invested in 2006 to further the development of this engine. So there have been a lot of funding from the Army, the Air Force, and NASA. It started with NASA, if I remember correctly, and leading to today's developments. The engine eventually was put together, it was built, and it was successfully operated back in 2012 as a demonstration engine in the Mojave Desert. So the engine flew spectacularly. It was very stable, very efficient, and partly because of that successful demonstration, SNC, which was looking for a new cool engine to adopt, decided to buy out Orbitec, which is now part of the larger SNC organization. And we're very blessed to be partners with them on further developments in analytical and computational modeling of this technology. So another aspect of our research is focused on the modeling of acoustic instabilities. And one nice thing about the SNC engine and similar engines is that we get to not only model the performance of those engines and try to analyze the flow field, we also are able to analyze the stability of the engine itself, which is becoming even more important than the performance itself, because an engine that's not stable, it does not matter if it is highly performing. Stability always comes first. And this is a case where we studied the modeling of transverse waves in liquid rocket engines that tend to be shorter in size with low aspect ratios, trying to understand why amplitudes, pressure amplitudes can exceed expectations and lead to the damage to the injector faceplates. The study itself led to several journal articles and the ABES-RM Distinguished Medallion in Astronautics that was received by Charles Haddad, one of our former teammates who moved on. Right now he works in Houston for Schlumberger. Another very cool concept that we've been working on, inspired by upper stage applications, is that of a hemispherical liquid rocket engine. This is an academic version of it that has been studied extensively by one of our teammates, Langston Williams. And Langston was able to uncover 4 exact solutions for the hemispherical engine, also to carry out some very nifty computational simulations that help to describe the behavior of the flow field throughout the engine. And sure enough, Langston also was recognized with the same ABES-RM medallion in astronautics, and he ended up representing the United States at the international conference that is held by the Astronautical Society back in 2018, I believe. And again, this is a glimpse at some of the work that we like to do. We were able to achieve 4 exact solutions of Euler's equations that led to irrotational potential models and also fully rotational complex lamellar type models and Beltramian models that represent very nicely the behavior of the flow inside this cyclonic engine. And historically, we've also looked at other configurations. It all started with cylindrical chambers, cyclones in right cylindrical chambers, and then we looked at conical chambers because it all really goes back to the cyclone separator industry, where cycloning was being used extensively in also uranium enrichment that was used after World War II. So this, the use of conical or combination of cylindrical sections with conical sections is important to a variety of industrial applications beside propulsive devices. And our relationship with Orbitech and SNC really goes back to 95, 96, when I was recruited to help develop the technology and write the first proposal, or the second proposal rather, to promote the concept in the context of the Vortex hybrid rocket engine. At the time, it was called VIRA, or the Vortex Injection Hybrid Rocket Engine. It was led by Bill Knuth, the chief engineer at Orbitech at the time. And our results were successful. And again, to skip hundreds of pages of algebra, we were able to obtain an exact solution for the first wall-bounded cyclone in a rectangular chamber that helped better understand the physics, that helped provide confidence in the physicality of this particular flow field, and dispel any skepticism within NASA about whether or not the flow can actually develop and not simply short circuit and exit the chamber without fulfilling its role, its cyclonic role. And there have been quite a few studies actually that have been published on this. And this is an animation actually of the analytical solution. It's if we were to compare it to CFD results, one is almost a mirror image of the other. We've been fortunate to be able to extract closed form analytical expressions that represent all these different models, the complex lamellar type, the linear Beltramian, the nonlinear Beltramian, and some generalizations that enable us to capture any type of inlet and outlet that make the analytical solutions almost compete with the computational models that we have out there. And really we're fortunate to have been able to develop all of these models, and we have them for the rectangular chambers, for the conical chambers, and also now for the hemispherical chambers. And when we try to characterize a cyclone is really defined by two different metrics. One of them is called the mantle, and the mantle is that interfacial layer that separates what we call the outer vortex or the updraft from the inner vortex or the downdraft. And this layer is rotating but non-translating, because along that layer itself, that surface, the axial velocity is defined to be zero. So outside that, outwardly of that layer, the flow is everywhere upward. Inside of it, or inwardly, the flow is everywhere downward. So UZ, essentially, the axial velocity is going to switch signs. So mathematically, we can model it very nicely by plotting the axial velocity and determining where it goes to zero. For the complex, the quasi-complex lamellar model, it goes to zero at 1/√2 or 0.707, because we have an exact analytical solution for it. It's where cosine pi r squared goes to zero, which is where r equal 1/√2. And for the Beltramian model, it's where the Bessel function goes to zero, which is at 0.628. And when we first obtained those results, we were not sure whether they made sense or not, until we later realized that studies at MIT by the famous department head, who was an experimentalist, confirmed it, because in his studies, he also had converged onto two different solutions, one at 0.62 and 1.72, which were very close to the theoretical results that our models have been able to uncover. And even in the presence of chemical reactions, the location of the mantle seems to be consistent with our findings. Interestingly, we can also, and some researchers have reported the presence of multiple mantles. Instead of having just one mantle, you could have kind of multiple flow passes inside the engine that our research solutions, our analytical solution, have been able to capture very nicely. In fact, in one paper by Dr. Anderson at the University of Wisconsin, he pointed out that the theoretical results that we had were closer to his experimental findings than those predicted by CFD. So here you notice that the theoretical prediction of 0.791 was closer to the experimental values than those predicted by CFD. So, and this continued on and on. We also have applied the same concept to spherical chambers, and we found we were able to predict the location of those mantles very nicely. This is a plot showing the streamlines associated with the presence of 3 or 5 mantles inside a hemispherical chamber, which is now the ideal chamber for upper stage applications. The same thing here in color. And also another very important metric, I mentioned earlier, there are two metrics that are of importance. The second metric has to do with the boundary layer characterization and the forced vortex score, which extends from the axis of rotation all the way to the point where the tangential velocity or the swirl velocity is the highest. And being able to estimate the thickness or the diameter of the forced vortex, where the flow behaves as a solid body in rotation, is very important. And sure enough, we're able to predict the thickness of that boundary layer very nicely. And it turned out to be a function of the vortex Reynolds number, V. And we've generalized the solution to arbitrary systems, complex lamellar, linear Beltramian, nonlinear Beltramian, etc. We also extended it to other flow fields that are bipolar, that apply to external flows, such as the Lamb-Oseen or Berger's rod, Sullivan, and Kuhl. We also have been able to predict those parameters with great accuracy for any particular profile that's out there. And amongst the benefits of carrying out asymptotic analyses was the ability of uncovering dimensionless parameters that play an important role in the characterization of the flow field. And these include the vortex Reynolds number, which plays an important role in swirl-driven cyclonic motions. We also are able to predict analytically the thickness of the boundary layers in the core region and along the walls, being able to predict the maximum tangential velocity and also the frequency or the angular speed of the forced vortex, where the fluid actually is spinning as a rigid body. We have generalizations to those that we have been able to produce that enable us to predict the stream function for any arbitrary inflow velocity at the head wall and the end wall. And these are nice because once you obtain the stream function, you can derive or you can essentially deduce all the other properties from the stream function. And we also looked at stability, which is an important factor. This is hydrodynamic stability. And what we found out is that the higher the swirl velocity, the more stable the profile gets, which is something almost counterintuitive unless you look at a top. So if you spin a top, you realize that the higher the spin, the more stable the top is. And the same thing sort of occurs inside a vortex engine. The higher the tangential velocity, the more coherent and laminar-like the motion gets inside the engine. And we've also looked at leakage opportunities for the injectant and realized that keeping the engine shorter is actually better. But really, the most important thing that our team focuses on is characterizing the stability of engines. And we've developed a systematic approach to that most of our team members are working on. Given a certain CAD drawing of any particular engine, we're able to first mesh the engine itself and then run it through our finite volume solver, obtain the characteristic properties throughout the entire chamber, all the thermodynamic properties, and then and we do that on an unstructured mesh, and then convert the unstructured mesh to a structured mesh where our acoustic solver works better, and then run our vorteacoustic entropic energy solver on the structured mesh. And from that, we're able to predict all the different resonant frequencies, the tangential frequencies, the longitudinal frequency. We're also able to predict the waveforms, the mode shapes with great accuracy. Here we're looking at some results of the spectra that we obtained that enable us to predict also the growth rates, the stability growth rates at any given mode. So amongst the byproducts of our analyses, we're able to predict and characterize all the different stability integrals for a particular system. And this helps in improving the design of a certain engine. We're able to predict also the location of the velocity mantle and the thermal mantle, which is defined as the layer along which the temperature is highest inside the chamber, to make sure that one is invaginated by the other and that there is no contact with the walls. Now, again, it all started with the VIRA engine, the vortex injection hybrid rocket engine, where a study that sort of initiated this entire program that was funded by NASA. And you're looking at the first phase one final report that I participated on back in '96. So that tells you we started working on it back in '95. And the program has been deemed of substantial importance, so much so that there was an earmark to it here from the Senate side from a defense appropriation bill back in 2007. But as we continued to work on hybrids, we sort of digressed a little bit and started to consider other interesting concepts that leverage the swirling nature of different vortices. Here we're looking at the quadrupole vortex engine concept that has the advantage of scooping the hot products of combustion from the core region of the chamber and bringing them in contact with the walls, thus increasing the erosive nature of the swirl and increasing the regression rate of those hybrid motors. We've also looked at systems that include deeply submerged nozzles that prevent the leakage of the oxidizer that enters the chamber by ensuring that all of the oxidizer reaches the top section of the chamber where it combusts with, where it reacts with the fuel before it's being expanded through the nozzle itself. And we've developed some very nice predictive capabilities for these types of engines. And this is one animation of that. And moving on, we've also looked at unidirectional vortex hybrids where the flow field is essentially unidirectional. You've seen the vortex pancake flow chambers, the ones that are end burning. And we've looked at a variety of different types and analyzed those, eventually leading to the doctoral dissertation of Tim Marquardt, who graduated just last semester, where he developed a very nice predictive regression rate formula for a swirling flow in unidirectional and bidirectional chambers. Also, Tim worked on a proprietary NTP engine, a nuclear thermal propulsion engine, where he obtained very good results, with great predictive capability. Unfortunately, we cannot share the results with you on those. Now, again, when we talk about swirl, we also look at swirl that is engendered in a solid rocket motor. Most solid rocket motors develop swirl during their flight. And this is a problem that we also have been very interested in analyzing. Some experiments that go back to the 80s demonstrated that there was swirl taking place inside simulated solid rocket motors, and yet no analytical solution had been advanced to help explain that until Ori came about. Again, Ori is another champion from our team, graduated also last year, receiving numerous awards for Best Solid Rocket Paper Award, the most outstanding graduate student in the state of Alabama. And he not only developed one, but multiple solutions for swirling flows in the context of solid rocket motors and also liquid rocket engines, including the effects of compressibility. So he had some beautiful studies conducted using the Rayleigh-Jansen expansion technique. And prior to that, we also had Andrew Fisk, who won the most outstanding master's student in the international competition at the master's level for his paper on the swirling Terconian fluid field in solid rocket motors, which later got published in the Journal of Fluid Mechanics, one of the top journals in the field of aerodynamics. And we also have teamed up with some of our collaborators in France at ONERA, and we have studied and developed models for star-shaped grains and grains of arbitrary cross-section, also leading to papers in good journals such as the Physics of Fluids and GFM. And we've also looked at the effects of compressibility and how they lead to an enhancement in speed due to the changes in density. And these have led to several articles in the Royal Society and GFM. Again, we like to publish within academia, and we like to publish in good journals, and also we like to publish review articles. With some of our, we have maybe 5 or 6 papers that have been identified by the chief editors as review articles. This is one GFM paper also that introduces a very unique approach that enables us to pretty much take any, imagine this, any incompressible solution and find the corresponding compressible high-speed counterpart under high-speed conditions. And this can be done analytically, sometimes with difficulty, but so far we've been successful at modeling a large variety of solutions. And again, back to the concept of viscous fluid flow, this is a textbook that is used to introduce the boundary layer theory to a large variety of engineers. It's used at over 1,000 universities worldwide, and we're fortunate to also have made important seminal contributions to the advancement of boundary layer theory, the characterization of the skin friction coefficient, the boundary layer thickness that most engineers would have studied by now. We were able to find the direct links between the skin friction factors and the boundary layer thickness directly to any given profile that is positive, that enabled us to reverse engineer the problem and actually solve the boundary layer equations almost exactly. For flow over a flat plate, such as the Blasius equation, which could only be solved numerically, we were able to solve it analytically. And for example, if you look at the Blasius equation, one of the most well-known benchmark problems, it's known for its limited radius of convergence, and also being solved mostly numerically. Here it's depicted as using this solid line. And there have been many other solutions that have been advanced in the literature, some of them falling a bit shorter than others in matching the Blasius prediction. Well, recently, again, due to the advancements that we have made in this technology, we were able to find a simple fourth order polynomial that does a very good job at predicting the boundary layer thickness and all of its properties compared to the other P4, the Polhausen fourth order, and also a one-term exponential basis function that actually matches the Bezier solution essentially exactly. And the article on that was published just last December. It was designated as a feature article and showed up on the cover of the Physics of Fluids website. So lastly, we have interest in advancing high-order computational methods, thanks to our former postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Lijian Zhuan, who have advanced this technology. One of his legacies was the development of a technique known as the point value enhanced finite volume method, PFV, which has a tremendous potential compared to the discontinuous Galerkin method. It uses fewer mesh points, fewer degrees of freedom to obtain one or two orders advancements in the error. So we have much higher error, much higher order errors, much smaller errors for a smaller number of mesh points or degrees of freedom. So this technique was primarily developed by Dr. Zhuan. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but we are hoping to continue to promote this technology moving forward. So overall, our team has come across 18 different dimensionless parameters that help to explain the physics in a variety of configurations that are related to the internal flow motion in different propulsion systems, ranging from solids to liquids to hybrids to nuclear thermal propulsion systems. One of them is known as the penetration number, which combines the blowing speed at the wall, the frequency, the kinematic viscosity, and the radius or the characteristic length in a chamber. When kept constant, one can vary all the other variables, such as the frequencies. You could move from a low frequency to a very high frequency, and yet the penetration depth, which is essentially the region in which rotationality is important, remains constant. So it's one of those parameters that play an important role in predicting the boundary layer thickness, or the penetration depth rather, in systems that have oscillatory behavior. And that's it. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of the type of research, a flavor of the research that we do, which is mostly computational and analytical. That's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you very much.